Hello, and welcome back to the D.FINED Engagement Bookcast. I'm Doug Fine. Today we'll be talking with Devin Halliday about his book, Belonging Factor: How Great Brands and Great Leaders Inspire Loyalty, Build Community, and Grow Profits. We'll be discussing Chapter 2 today, entitled The Importance of Belonging. Devin, we're so glad you made it back to talk to me, and I hope that people will really benefit from this chat. Good day, everybody. How are you? I'm Doug Fine, and I run a small consultancy in Augusta, Georgia called D.FINED Performance Solutions. We do leadership development, engagement training, employee training. So I'm here today for Chapter 2 with Devin Halliday. He's the author of Belonging Factor: How Great Brands and Great Leaders Inspire Loyalty, Build Community, and Grow Profits. They're all important. Growing profits, that's kind of key to business, isn't it, Devin?
Yeah, I would say pretty much every leader is hired for that specific outcome.
Right. So we're going to talk about Chapter 2 today, and the title is The Importance of Belonging. And in your book, you talk about this thing called a belonging deficit in our culture, in our world, in our workplaces. What's that mean?
Yeah, so I think this is so important. So IBM did a study, an incredible study, and I reference many pieces of that in the book to shine examples. And one of the pieces specifically is around this deficit in belonging that exists. And what that means is this sense of not being connected to any other group that we can really identify with, to any other principles or values that we can really identify with. Now, what I'll tell you is at the time I wrote this book, we weren't in the current circumstances that we find ourselves in July, August of 2020, where there have been some galvanizing events that have occurred that have really drawn people into certain camps, whether it's ideology, politically, justice related, etc. Now, but those are still pretty big camps, pretty basic level stuff. They're not necessarily, for most Americans, they're not necessarily the things that affect that day to day, whether it's at work or within their close community. And so that's where the idea and the whole piece of a deficit with social media. We feel like we have connections to other people and maybe brands, but they're pretty surface level, right? They're different than they have been. So it's almost kind of like a desert. Wow. where we're living and we're surviving, but are we really aligned in values with as many of the people we interact with and as many of the brands or organizations we interact with as we might have used to been before things became so transactional? So belonging is about a sense of value alignment, a sense of maybe relationship between people, leaders and employees, brands and customers, more so than it's about transactions or transactional interactions. Which is very common in a social media sphere and very common in a digital marketing, et cetera, sphere. And so that deficit kind of creates a lack of loyalty for employees to an organization or customers to a brand. And that lack of loyalty comes with a whole host of other psychological pieces that people are looking to fill when they move somewhere else, whether it's a new brand or a new company.
Yeah. So I think that when you were talking about that, like kind of the times we're in right now, because what we're talking about, folks, if you're ever going to review this, we are in the middle of an economic crisis not seen since the Great Depression. We're in the middle of a pandemic with COVID-19. We're in the middle of huge numbers of people unemployed. And we're in the middle of our society and our culture having to address the race issue, frankly, meaning we saw really bad actors kill George Floyd, and there was a complete reaction that was absolutely necessary. But now, like, what are we doing to remedy some things, and that's going to take time. But so this culture we're in right now is challenging. It's challenging. I think that, Devin, we're in our work going to have to do some rebuilding, because lots of people were just sort of like, we can't have you anymore. We don't need you anymore. We're dying here. We're closing our businesses. So there are millions of people that have experienced, being on the other end of having to leave a job that they might have loved, and all that. So this is a very challenging time. But boy, if we have to rebuild, we better rebuild our companies and our work groups and our tribes, if you will, in a way that will again help them feel safe, and help them understand why these kinds of things happen. So I'm going to quit talking now, and I want to get to.
But you're spot on though, Doug. You're spot on. And right. So what's the solution to a belonging deficit? Would be the factors that create a sense of belonging, right?
Yes.
And ultimately, that's the sense of the book. And even though you have people galvanized around certain values or ideals right now in this environment, like I mentioned, those aren't the things that help move business forward, that help move communities and cultures forward on the day-to-day. They're bigger, massive movements that move societies in different directions. But every one of us is still figuring out how to live our lives in a way that we feel a sense of purpose, a sense of connection, and we're happy with who we are and what we're doing in life. And as businesses, creating an environment where customers and employees feel that connection to want to do that with you. That is so paramount to how we move forward.
Yeah, I was just thinking, I've had a lot to do with, over the years of my career, with establishing onboarding systems and practices and things. And I tell you, what a challenge. Maybe we could go into work together, Devin. We could talk about what is the best onboarding experience a company can make available to new employees after this thing of lots of businesses blowing up.
Yep.
And employees going to sign on the line and start in an organization, and they're probably wondering, they're going back to work. And so what can that employer, what can that company or the organization, what can they deliver and even promise at a minimum they're going to receive, these employees are going to experience working for them. So we talk about engagement in our line of work, and I love how in your book, Belonging Factor, in chapter 2, you actually define engagement, and you kind of cut to the chase, like, well, for my purposes, we're going to call engagement this. Do you mind if I share what you yeah. You defined it as people enjoying their jobs, finding value in their work, and they like showing up every day. And doggone it, that's good enough for me, Devin. It's a great definition for engagement. You want to say anything more about that?
Yeah, I think there are so many measurements and so many metrics and so many criteria that can be used, and so many tools and trainings. And really, what's the outcome that you're trying to drive? And that's where, with my definition, every one of those tools and every one of those trainings and every one of those processes is vital and critical to creating an environment where you can foster commitment to engagement. But really, what's the outcome? Engagement, it has to be defined in some way. And so that's really all this is what that outcome is. It's a person who feels compelled and committed to just show up and do it because they want to, because they enjoy it, even with the stuff that sucks, even with the bullshit that comes up every once in a while. They go, yep, cool, I'm ready for this, let's do this. Maybe not exactly like that, but still ready and prepared and willing to tackle whatever comes, and feeling good about going home at the end of the day and looking forward to showing back up the next day.
I like your vision there. So let's move on. We've established engagement as far as it's defined. This might be a little challenge for you, Devin, because in chapter 2, you put a metric out there for your readers, and you say that 40% of 18 to 24-year-olds say they have never felt an emotional connection to a brand or a business. 40% of that cohort never felt emotionally connected to a brand or a business. So, what's a business to do if they're hiring millennials, or what are these? They're Gen Y now, or I'm going to call them Gen C19, a generation of COVID-19. That's what I'm going to make a lot of money with that moniker.
I think the Zoomers, that's also what these ones are called. I think.
Yeah, the Zoomers. How about that? So what does an organization have to do to help these young people get an emotional connection with the business?
Yeah, so really important to that specific metric is that is both an internal and an external measurement. It's measuring internally those who are in the workforce feeling connected to the brand that they work for, and those external who are customers or potential customers describing that they just transactionally make purchases.
Focus on the internal, if you don't mind.
Absolutely, 100%. But that distinction is important because when you have employees internally who are not feeling connected to it, they're not delivering any level of experience that could generate that external feeling as well.
Loud and clear. Thank you for clarifying that. That's excellent.
Yeah. So internally, the reason this metric is so important about the missing emotional connection is when you think about Maslow, the hierarchy of needs, and that sense of belonging, that trust, psychological safety, those things that really occupy that tier. Those are centered in emotions, and emotions are a result of experiences, both predominantly with people that represent a brand. A brand is an entity that is a result of people making decisions. And so when you have young people who are not feeling connected emotionally to that brand, internally, to their organization, the fixes are around trust, around empowerment and engagement, giving a voice, allowing people to be part of a solution. We're talking about inclusion, right? Because inclusion is the antidote for a lack of belonging. Inclusion is the set of principles, practices, or behaviors that bring people into maybe a sense of belonging, along with aligned values. What I'll tell you, the number one answer for 18 to 24-year-olds is what my company says is bullshit. They don't actually do it. So their mission statement that's up on a wall, their values that are on, every piece of poster board everywhere across every office are not actually lived by leaders or through expectations, measurements, etc. So that might be, we value our employees and the work they do to serve our community, right? That might be a value as an example. Yet the company institutes a mandatory Saturday policy, let's say, right? Where everybody has to work 2 Saturdays a month. Well, is that valuing your employees and community? Maybe, but how about having a conversation with your employees or an opportunity to engage with your employees to say, listen, we're going to run up against a lot of productivity needs here. We're going to run up against a lot of things. And there's a few ways we have some ideas to tackle it. We'd love some of your ideas as well, because we are going to deliver for our clients, our customers, et cetera, on time. And here's the resources we have. Here's the, kind of the options, and let's do this. And so you invite, whether it's through ERGs that you have that kind of are empowered to speak on behalf of larger groups of employees. It's through surveys. If you're a smaller organization, it's just through a leadership meeting with your teams. That is a really simple example of how you can start to bridge that emotional gap. Because when it's the old adage, right? Nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. I think that's been spun around a million different ways, a million different times. But the truth of the matter is, when there is not an alignment of values, when people are crying bullshit on what you say versus what you do, they're just going to be compliant for as long as they need to, until they can go somewhere else where they can be committed.
Compliance does not equal commitment.
Never.
So here, to close, I would love to hear, you put another metric up in chapter 2, Devin, And you say that brand belonging can grow revenue up to 12%. So brand belonging, and maybe let's go back to the tattoo. You belong. You're in the club if you have a Harley tattoo.
Oh,
But
yeah.
what else does brand belong? What does it emit from you when you talk about what are some characteristics of brand belonging?
Yeah, so we get into some good detail on this later in the book. So I'm really looking forward to diving more into that.
Sure.
But the essence is that you're part of a community of others, right? So with Harley Davidson, my Harley Davidson shirt might be underneath my suit and tie, right? But if I'm somewhere and I see a person, like maybe I'm grabbing lunch and somebody's got a t-shirt on or whatever, and I see their Harley tattoo on their arm or something, and I'm like, oh yeah, what's up, man? You know, like I like, yes, we are simpatico, right? Or there's forums online where people just like geek out on all the stuff that they're interested in. It's a community that exists, whether it's virtual or it's in person. And I know that even if there's things we disagree on, we are Harley people, right? I'm not personally, but you know, just for the example. So that's a sense of brand belonging. What that does is it creates this, like it almost immeasurable. There's a number on this one, 12%, but almost immeasurable kind of referral generating. These folks who are so committed, right? Apple has a long history of this as well, where there's such commitment into the brand by groups of people. They're fans, they're fanatics, right? Think about it that way, is almost like being such fans, to where if an issue comes up, if somebody has a complaint, they might know how to solve it. And they're like, oh, dude, I know this. I can do this for you. Oh, you don't have to call him. Or they say, oh, yeah, just give a call. There's this guy, Jared. He works at the place right down here. And Jared, he always hooks me up, right? You get those types of experiences that personalize that brand and that emotional connection to it for others. And it grows the business. Not only because you get loyal people buying more of what it is that you offer in product or service, but because they are also champions for you out in the world. In fact, there's an episode of my podcast, it's the Belonging Factor podcast, where I talk with Mike Japrari. He's the founder of SJC Drums. It's a music instrument company. And they are cream of the crop when it comes to this type of experience with their community. And he talks about having customers who actually solve other customers' tech issues.
Yes.
Just because they're on Facebook together and chatting about stuff, and they solve it. And so it never even makes it to the company to have to address, which is incredible. So when you talk about a reduction of your expenses and you talk about an increase of your product or service sales, IBM put the number on this after studying 600 businesses. And there's a few other really dramatic metrics in addition to that are discussed in the book.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at like same store, or you look at like same industry, or you look at same geographic marketplace in competitive offers, they measure each one of those different segments very, very, very well. And having the opportunity to share that in the book, I think really gives some insight into what the actual profit value is to these things that feel fluffy and hard to measure.
Right. Devin, we're about to close, and I want to kind of give a preview of where we're going.
Yeah.
We're going to go to chapter 3 next time we meet, and it's called The Past Informs the Present. Perrin, My Privilege. So that's going to be very, it's a great time to be talking about. I'm really curious to see what more you have to say about your privilege. And I can't thank you enough for sharing this time with me to discuss in chapter 2 of Belonging Factor. Great brands and great leaders inspire loyalty, build community, and grow profits. Devin Halliday, we'll see you for chapter 3 in, down the road.
Sounds great.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Doug.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much again for joining us for this D.FINED Engagement Podcast. We're glad to have you. And next time we'll be discussing chapter 3 of Devin's book, The Past Informs the Present, My Privilege. Don't hesitate to check out our other bookcasts at this address here. And thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you next time for Chapter 3. Bye-bye.